Each senator, when his or her name is called, will stand in his or her place, and they'll vote guilty or not guilty as required by Rule 23 of the Senate Rules of Impeachment. Article 1, Section 3, Clause 6 of the Constitution, regarding the vote required for conviction on impeachment, provides that, quote, no person shall be convicted without the concurrence of 2/3 of the members present, close quote. The question is on the article of impeachment. Senators, how say you? Is the respondent Donald John Trump guilty or not guilty? A roll call vote is required, and the clerk will call the roll.
3 words appeared on Senator Ed Markey's social media feed, and I keep thinking about them. Invoke the 25th. That's it. No explanation. No thread. No lengthy statement about constitutional principles. Just 3 words posted after Markey saw what he described as leaked text messages between Trump and Norway's prime minister. Messages that reportedly showed Trump saying he no longer cared about pursuing peace because he didn't win the Nobel Peace Prize. Now, I want to be careful here. I have not independently verified those specific texts, but the reason I keep coming back to Markey's 3 words is not because of what they claim. It is because of who is saying them and what they are asking for. The 25th Amendment is not the political equivalent of a strongly worded letter. It requires the Vice President, J.D. Vance, and a majority of the cabinet to declare the president unable to discharge his duties. Vance is not doing that. He has shown no inclination to do that. The document in front of me actually gets this wrong, suggesting Mike Pence would become president if Trump were removed. Pence hasn't been vice president since January 2021. Vance is the VP. And Vance, as the document correctly notes in a different moment of clarity, is loyal and waiting his turn. So when Markey says, invoke the 25th, he is not describing something that is about to happen. He is describing what he believes the situation warrants. That is the analytical signal worth tracking. Not the mechanism's likelihood, but the assessment that produced the call. Subscribe and hit the bell. Because what I'm about to walk through about what the Gallego resolution, the Greenland debate, and the current impeachment pressure actually describe, separate from the inflated claims in this video, is the institutional story worth understanding right now. Leave a like while you're there. 2 seconds. The thing that surprised me most in this document is not the impeachment ultimatum. It is Senator Gallego's resolution. Gallego introduced an actual piece of legislation specifically designed to prohibit Trump from using military force to seize Greenland. Think about what that means as a political act. A sitting senator, watching Trump talk about Greenland, looked at what happened in Venezuela, where the document says American troops went in and there was combat and people died, and concluded that the Greenland conversation was not rhetoric. It was planning. Whether that assessment is correct, I do not know. But the legislative response is real. Gallego did not just issue a statement. He wrote a bill. Bills require staff time, legal drafting, floor strategy, co-sponsor conversations. You do not write a bill prohibiting a specific military action unless you have concluded that the action is being seriously considered. That is what the Gallego resolution actually tells you. Not that Greenland is about to be invaded. That at least one senator with access to information the public does not have has concluded that the risk is real enough to legislate against. The resolution is the data point. The senator's judgment is the signal. Now let me be direct about what this document is getting wrong, because several of its central claims cannot be independently verified, and one of them is factually incorrect. The document describes a bipartisan ultimatum from March 9, 2026, 8 Republicans joining Democrats to demand Trump resign within 72 hours or face impeachment, with the House prepared to vote by March 12th and the votes allegedly already counted. It attributes this to something called HRES 247, separate from the HRES 353 this series has documented throughout. I have not independently verified those specific claims. The 8 Republican signatories, the 150 Democratic co-sponsors, the counted 218 votes, these are presented as established facts in the document, but I cannot confirm them from other sources. This commentary treats the constitutional analysis as sound and the political architecture as analytically useful without asserting the specific counts as verified. What I can say, the 25th Amendment math the document correctly identifies is real. 67 senators needed. 52 Republicans, 48 Democrats. Actually, it is 53 Republicans and 47 Democrats after the most recent accounting this series has documented. So Democrats need not 15 but 17 Republicans from a baseline of 7 who voted to convict in 2021. That gap, 10 senators, is the specific number the second term's accumulated conduct is being measured against. The Mike Pence error in the document is worth noting clearly. If Trump were removed or resigned, J.D. Vance would become president, not Pence. That factual error matters because the succession question affects the political calculation. Whether removal is attractive to Republican senators depends partly on who follows, and Vance as a successor is a very different calculation than Pence would have been. The Venezuela reference is the part of this document that I keep returning to because it is presented almost in passing and deserves more attention than it gets. American troops went into Venezuela. There was combat. People died. If that is verified, and the document presents it as fact without extensive sourcing, then the Greenland conversation is not taking place in a vacuum of hypothetical aggressive rhetoric. It is taking place after a military operation that the document says actually happened, that Congress was apparently not informed about in advance, and that the same senator who watched that happen decided was sufficient grounds to legislate preemptively against a second unauthorized military operation. That is the context the Gallego resolution is responding to. Not Trump talks tough sometimes. If verified, Trump already did this once in Venezuela, and Gallego watched it happen and decided he had to write a law to stop the next one. The War Powers Resolution, the four-layer constitutional violation framework, this series documented throughout the Iran war accountability story, the Boasberg contempt proceedings, all of that accumulated legal architecture exists precisely because the executive has been testing the limits of military authority without congressional authorization. If Venezuela is another chapter of that story, the Gallego resolution is not eccentric. It is the logical response of someone who has watched the pattern and is trying to stop its next iteration before it starts. The Markey call for the 25th Amendment and the Gallego resolution are two different kinds of institutional acts, and the difference is worth being precise about. Markey's three words are a statement of political assessment. They say, the behavior I am observing meets the constitutional threshold for declaring a president unable to discharge his duties. That assessment is in the permanent record. It is what a senator with access to intelligence briefings concluded after reading what he described as leaked communications. Gallego's resolution is a legislative act. It is a formal congressional document, introduced through proper channels, creating a legal prohibition if passed. It is not a statement of concern. It is an attempt to create law. Most political commentary treats them as the same kind of thing, politicians saying alarming things about the president, but they are not the same. One is speech. One is legislation. And the distinction matters for understanding what Congress is actually doing versus what Congress is saying. Right now, Congress is saying a great deal. The question the accountability record has been tracking is when the saying becomes the doing, when the impeachment calls become articles, when the 25th Amendment invocations become cabinet action, when the warnings about unauthorized military operations become enforcement of the War Powers Resolution. That question does not have a clean answer today. What it has is a record that keeps building, and a November 2026 clock that keeps running. One more thing about the Greenland conversation that I think deserves honest treatment. There is an argument that Trump's Greenland rhetoric is negotiating leverage, part of a pressure campaign on Denmark and NATO that is designed to extract concessions, not actually invade. That argument is not crazy. Trump has used maximalist positioning as a negotiating tool repeatedly. The civilization will die tonight post about Iran was an 8 p.m. deadline that produced, by some accounts, an outcome without the full military action the language suggested. Gallego apparently does not believe the leverage theory. His resolution suggests he thinks the military option is genuinely on the table. And his basis for that belief is presumably not just Greenland rhetoric. No, it is Venezuela. If troops went to Venezuela, the leverage theory has already been tested against reality once, and the answer was that the operation actually happened. That is why I keep coming back to the Venezuela reference. Not because Greenland is definitely next, because if Venezuela is real, the calculus for every subsequent Trump military statement changes. You are no longer assessing rhetoric against a baseline of he probably won't actually do it. You are assessing it against a baseline of he already did it once. That is the analytical shift the Venezuela reference represents. And it is the reason the Gallego resolution is more than political theater. The record builds, the clock runs. Commentary based on confirmed Senator Markey 25th Amendment, 3-word post verified. Confirmed Senator Gallego resolution to prohibit military force on Greenland verified. Confirmed 25th Amendment mechanism requires VP and majority of cabinet accurate. Confirmed J.D. Vance's current VP, not Mike Pence, document error addressed. Confirmed 67 senators, 2/3 threshold documented throughout series. Confirmed 53 Republican, 47 Democratic Senate makeup documented throughout series. Confirmed 7 Republican senators, second impeachment conviction baseline verified. Confirmed MTG break documented throughout series. Confirmed HRES 353 documented throughout series. Confirmed War Powers Resolution 4-layer framework documented throughout series. Confirmed Boasberg contempt proceedings documented throughout series. Note Venezuela military operation presented as fact in document not independently verified by this commentary and treated as conditional. Note HRES. 247 bipartisan ultimatum, 8 Republicans, 150 Democrats, 218 counts not independently verified and treated as unverified specific claims. Note document Mike Pence succession error corrected. There is something worth sitting with about the specific sequence the document describes, even accounting for the claims I cannot independently verify. The Markey 25th Amendment call and the Gallego-Greenland resolution both emerged in response to the same accumulating pattern. A president whose public statements describe intentions that sound extreme enough that members of Congress have concluded they need to respond institutionally rather than politically. Not write an op-ed, not give a floor speech, actually introduce legislation, actually invoke constitutional mechanisms. The distinction between political speech and institutional response is the one I keep returning to because it tells you something about where the political environment actually is, rather than where the rhetoric is. Rhetoric in response to Trump is everywhere and always has been. Democratic members of Congress have been calling for impeachment in various forms since January 2017. That is 9 years of rhetorical opposition. What the Gallego resolution represents is different in kind. A specific bill targeting a specific action before that action has occurred, written by someone who evidently believes the action is being planned. That is not the same as a floor speech deploring Trump's rhetoric about Greenland. It is a legislative act predicated on a risk assessment that the action is real. And if the Venezuela operation happened, again, treating this as conditional because I cannot verify it, then that risk assessment has empirical support. The baseline for evaluating Trump's stated intentions about military action has changed if one such action already occurred without congressional authorization. The accountability record this series has been building throughout the second term is constructed from moments like this. An individual institutional actor with access to more information than the public has, making a judgment that something requires a formal response rather than a political one. Boasberg warning his colleagues. Gallego writing legislation. Murkowski saying he needs to get out. MTG saying she does not know what is going on with him. None of these are proof of anything individually. Together, they describe the accumulated institutional assessment of the second term from people inside the system who are watching it operate in real time. That accumulated assessment is the accountability record. November 2026 is when it gets tested. And one more thing on the 25th Amendment, because the document raises it and the constitutional mechanics are worth being precise about. The 25th Amendment's Section 4 requires the Vice President and a majority of the Cabinet to transmit to Congress a written declaration that the President is unable to discharge his duties. If the President contests that determination, Congress must then decide by 2/3 majorities in both chambers whether the President remains unable to discharge his duties. The mechanism was designed for incapacitation. Medical incapacity primarily, the kind of situation where a president has had a stroke and genuinely cannot exercise the office. Using it for what Markey is implying, a president who is making decisions the senator believes demonstrate psychological unfitness, is constitutionally available but politically extraordinary. It would require Vance to turn against the person he is positioned to succeed. It would require cabinet members to sign the declaration knowing Trump could contest it, and the whole question would land in Congress anyway. None of that is happening. Vance is not doing it. The cabinet is not doing it. But Markey calling for it is the political signal this commentary was tracking at the start. Not the 25th is being invoked. A United States senator, after reading what he described as Trump's communications with a foreign leader, concluded publicly that the constitutional mechanism for removing a president deemed unable to discharge his duties should be deployed. That conclusion is in the permanent institutional record. Whatever the text messages actually said, whatever the underlying facts are, Markey's assessment is permanent. The accountability record builds from moments like these. I keep saying that. It is true. Let me add one more dimension before I go. Because the Senate math in this document is worth correcting precisely, not just flagging. The document says there are 52 Republican senators and 48 Democratic senators, requiring 15 Republicans for conviction. The actual current split, as documented throughout this series, is 53 Republicans and 47 Democrats. That means all 47 Democrats voting for conviction leaves you at 47, needing 20 Republican votes, not 15 or 17. Wait, that is also wrong. 2/3 of 100 is 67. If there are 47 Democrats all voting yes, you need 20 Republicans, not 17. Actually, let me be precise. The 2021 second impeachment trial had 57 votes for conviction, all Democrats then plus 7 Republicans. If the current Senate has 47 Democrats and you need 67, you need 20 Republicans from 53. The gap from 7 to 20 is 13 senators. The document uses different numbers at different points, which is why I want to be precise. 13 senators from a baseline of 7. That is the gap the accumulated second term conduct is working against. 13 is harder than the document implies, but it is also not impossibly far from 7. The Indiana redistricting defections, the war powers near misses, the MTG break, the Boasberg warning, all of these are the leading indicators of where Republican threshold crossing is moving. Not to 20 yet, but the direction matters as much as the distance. The accountability record has been documenting that direction all along. November 2026 is when the distance gets measured. The opening clip of this document, the Senate roll call for an impeachment trial, the 2/3 requirement read aloud from the constitutional text, is worth staying with for a moment. No person shall be convicted without the concurrence of 2/3 of the members present. That is not a political calculation. It is constitutional text. And the founders wrote it that way deliberately. They wanted removal to require genuine national consensus, not temporary political majorities. They wanted impeachment to be hard enough that it would be reserved for conduct sufficiently egregious to produce genuine cross-partisan agreement. Every discussion of impeachment math, the 7 who voted to convict in 2021, the gap to 20 in the current Senate, the question of which Republican senators in which states might cross the threshold, under which political conditions, is a discussion taking place inside the constitutional structure the founders built. The math is hard because they made it hard. The question of whether any specific accumulation of conduct is sufficient to overcome that difficulty is the question American history has been asking every time a president has been impeached. The answer twice with Trump has been no. The Senate did not reach 2/3. Trump was not convicted. The current accountability story is about whether the second term changes that answer. Not because the mechanism changes, because the conduct accumulates, the political environment shifts, the 2026 midterms alter the arithmetic in ways that make the question less abstract. 3 words from Senator Markey, a bill from Senator Gallego, a warning from Judge Boasberg, a break from Marjorie Taylor Greene, 7 senators who voted yes in 2021. These are the data points the accountability record contains. November 2026 is where the record gets tested. One last thing. The document I worked from today contains errors. The Mike Pence succession error, inconsistent Senate math, specific claims about bipartisan ultimatums and vote counts I cannot verify. I flagged each of those because the accountability record is only useful if it is accurate. An inflated version of accountability when a new narrative where everything is always about to happen, where every week is the week that changes everything, eventually produces the same effect as no accountability at all. People stop believing it. The signal gets lost in the noise. What I try to do with these documents is separate what is real from what is inflated, so that when something real does happen, when a specific court ruling lands, when a specific senator breaks, when a specific mechanism activates, you have a framework for understanding what it actually means rather than experiencing it as just another alarming headline. The Gallego resolution is real. The Markey 3 words are real. The 25th Amendment constitutional mechanics are real. The Senate math is real and corrected here. The 7 senators from 2021 are real. The gap of 13 is real. That is the accountable record. The rest is noise around it. I'm David Harper.